Margaret Chen had always been a woman who believed in order. At 62, she ran the Riverside Community Center with the same quiet efficiency she'd once brought to raising her daughter alone. Her silver hair was always neatly pinned back, her cardigan pressed, her smile reserved but genuine for those who took the time to earn it. The community center had been her sanctuary for the past 15 years, a place where she could give back after life had given her both its greatest joy and its deepest challenges. Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, she brought her daughter Emma here for the support group meetings that had become such an important part of their routine. Emma was 34 now and had been blind since birth, but if you spent even 5 minutes with her, you'd quickly forget about her disability. She had her mother's gentle strength and a laugh that could fill a room with warmth. Her dark hair caught the light as she moved. With the confidence of someone who had learned to navigate the world through sound and touch and intuition, the trouble started on a particularly gray October evening. Margaret was walking Emma down the familiar hallway toward their meeting room when they encountered Harold Washington, the evening janitor. Harold was a man in his 70s, with weathered hands and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He'd been working at the center for just 3 months, always arriving quietly, doing his work without fuss. That evening, Harold was cleaning the windows in the hallway, and his flashlight was casting bright beams across the corridor. As Emma approached, the light swept directly across her face. Margaret watched her daughter instinctively turn away, raising her hand to shield her eyes from the glare. Something protective and fierce rose up in Margaret's chest. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharper than she intended. "Could you please be more careful with that light? My daughter is blind, and bright lights can be very uncomfortable for her." Harold looked up, startled. He immediately lowered the flashlight. "Oh, I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't realize—" But Margaret was already guiding Emma past him, her jaw set with the kind of determination that had carried her through decades of advocating for her daughter's needs. She'd fought too many battles, overcome too many obstacles to let carelessness slide by. The next week, it happened again. Harold's flashlight beams swept across Emma's face as they walked down the hall. This time, Margaret's patience had worn thin. "This is the second time," she said, her voice carrying the weight of years of frustration with a world that didn't always accommodate her daughter's needs. "I asked you to be more careful." Harold's face flushed with embarrassment. "Ma'am, I truly apologize. Sometimes I get focused on my work and—" "That's exactly the problem," Margaret interrupted. "Lack of attention to how your actions affect others." Emma tugged gently on her mother's arm. "Mom, it's really okay." But Margaret had made up her mind. The next day, she marched into the center director's office and requested that Harold be reassigned to different hours. "I don't want to get anyone in trouble," she explained to Mrs. Patterson, the director, "but my daughter has enough challenges without having to worry about being blinded by flashlights in what should be a safe, comfortable environment." Mrs. Patterson, a woman who'd known Margaret for years and respected her judgment, agreed. Harold was quietly moved to the morning shift. Margaret felt a sense of relief, and also, if she was honest with herself, a small pang of guilt, but she pushed that feeling aside. She'd done what any mother would do. 3 weeks passed peacefully. Emma continued to attend her support group meetings, navigating the familiar hallways with the grace that never failed to make Margaret proud. Then came the evening that changed everything. Margaret was running late that Thursday. Her car had trouble starting, and by the time they arrived at the community center, Emma's meeting had already begun. Margaret walked her daughter to the meeting room door, as always, then settled into her usual spot in the lobby with a book. About 20 minutes later, she heard commotion from down the hallway. Raised voices, someone calling for help. Margaret's heart jumped as she recognized the sound coming from the direction of Emma's meeting room. She hurried down the corridor and found a small crowd gathered outside the room. Through the doorway, she could see that the meeting had been interrupted. Several people were standing around looking confused and concerned. "What happened?" Margaret asked Mrs. Patterson, who had appeared from her office. "There's been some kind of electrical problem," Mrs. Patterson explained, worry creasing her brow. "The lights went out suddenly, and now there seems to be smoke coming from somewhere in the walls. We're evacuating everyone just to be safe." Margaret's eyes immediately searched for Emma among the group of people filing out of the room. Her heart began to race when she didn't see her daughter's familiar figure. "Where's Emma?" she asked one of the other participants. "She was sitting in the back corner," the woman replied. When the lights went out and we heard the crackling sound, everyone got up quickly. In the confusion, Margaret didn't wait to hear more. She pushed past the small crowd toward the meeting room, but Mrs. Patterson caught her arm. "Margaret, we can't go back in there. The fire department is on their way." "My daughter is still in there." Margaret's voice cracked with fear and desperation. That's when she saw Harold Washington coming down the hallway, moving faster than she'd ever seen the elderly janitor move. He was carrying his flashlight and what looked like a small toolkit. "Ma'am," he said, breathing heavily but speaking with calm authority. "I know where she is. I've been I've been paying attention." Before Margaret could ask what he meant, Harold was walking purposefully into the darkened meeting room, his flashlight beam cutting through the haze. Margaret held her breath, Mrs. Patterson's hand still on her arm, as they watched Harold's light moving methodically through the room. The beam swept left, then right, then toward the back corner where Emma had been sitting. And there, in the steady glow of Harold's flashlight, they saw him kneeling beside Emma. She was sitting on the floor behind an overturned chair, looking calm but uncertain. Harold was speaking to her in low, reassuring tones, his light carefully directed away from her face, but illuminating the path ahead of them. Slowly, carefully, Harold helped Emma to her feet and began guiding her toward the door. Margaret could see that he was being incredibly thoughtful about how he used the flashlight, never shining it directly at Emma, but always ensuring her path was clearly lit. When they emerged from the room, Emma was smiling with relief. "Mom, Harold stayed to help me when everyone else left. He made sure I could find my way safely." Margaret looked at Harold's weathered face, saw the genuine care in his eyes, and felt something shift in her chest. A mixture of gratitude and shame that made her throat tight. "I don't understand," she said quietly. "Why were you here?" "You work mornings now." Harold adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses, suddenly looking shy. "Well, ma'am, after what happened before, I started coming in during the evening meetings sometimes. Not to work, just to make sure your daughter was safe. I realized that my flashlight had been bothering her, and I felt terrible about it." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I've been learning about how to help people who are visually impaired. My grandson, he's been teaching me. He lost his sight in Afghanistan, and he's shown me how light can be used properly, as a tool to help, not to hurt." Margaret felt tears prick her eyes as understanding dawned. "You've been watching over Emma? I hope that's okay," Harold said quickly. "I know you were upset with me before, and rightfully so, but I wanted to make sure I could be helpful if she ever needed it. Tonight, when the power went out and everyone got confused, I knew exactly where she was sitting. I've been paying better attention." Emma reached out and found Harold's arm, squeezing it gently. "Thank you," she said simply, "for seeing me." The fire department arrived and determined that an old electrical connection had shorted out, creating smoke but no real danger. As the evening wound down and the building was declared safe, Margaret found herself standing with Harold in the parking lot. "I owe you an apology," she said, the words coming from a place deeper than pride. "I misjudged you. I thought you were being careless, but you were actually being watchful." Harold shook his head gently. "No apology needed, ma'am. You were protecting your daughter. That's what good mothers do. I just wish I'd been better at showing my intentions from the start." Margaret looked at this kind man, really looked at him, and saw someone who understood what it meant to care for others, to pay attention to their needs, even when no one was watching. Would you consider going back to your evening shift?" she asked. "I think I'd feel better knowing you were here when Emma is here." Harold's face broke into a warm smile. "I'd be honored, ma'am." In the weeks that followed, Margaret often saw Harold in the hallways during Emma's meetings. His flashlight would briefly illuminate their path, always angled carefully, always respectful. Sometimes she'd catch him adjusting burnt-out bulbs in the areas where Emma walked most frequently, or quietly clearing obstacles from pathways. One evening, as Margaret watched Harold patiently explain to a new volunteer how to properly offer assistance to someone with visual impairment, she realized something profound. The light that mattered most wasn't the one from Harold's flashlight. It was the light of attention, of caring, of seeing beyond the surface to what people truly needed. Sometimes, Margaret reflected, we mistake protection for connection and caution for kindness. But real kindness takes the time to understand, to learn, and to shine light in all the right places.